Glad to be here today with you. It might take a second for this to catch up, but Renee and I are here, and we're going to be walking you through a few of the kind of the basic things, some of the things that we think would be really helpful for you to see and to know. And so anyways,
stay with you.
Oh my goodness, I've got to turn off something on my computer. Just a second here.
Walking you through a few of the kind of the
sometime. Or is that you, Renee?
Oh, sorry. I don't know what
you.
I did. Yeah.
I think you had the. That's okay. That's okay. Okay,
yeah,
we're
I just
here.
shut it down. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thanks guys for being here, and we can see your comments and things like that. Renee's here to help me kind of make sure that if you have questions that you are able to ask them. And so hopefully that'll be quite easy. If anything comes up along the way, you can just say, hey, I don't understand. I can't see that, whatever it is. And Renee will alert me. And this time is for you. And it's to help you just make the most of the beginning stages of your membership, or if you're just kind of starting out in art, or wherever you are. Like, I know some people might join us who are here who have quite a bit of experience, but they either just want to like see the way that I go about something, or maybe see if there's something that they might have missed. So whoever you are and however you're here, we're just glad that you're here. So Renee, do you want to say anything before?
Oh, yeah. No, last Friday we did a new member orientation. So that's different than this. That was just for kind of more information on using the site. So if you missed out on that, that would be really awesome if you took, it's actually an hour long, but it would be well worth your time to watch that. So you can find that in the Facebook community in the announcement section, or you can go into the journey part of your membership, and there's a link there too. So anyway,
awesome.
That would be really useful too.
Thank you. I see Patricia, Mary, Jude, Marta. If you're out there and you want me to read out your name, go ahead and you can say something about that. Now I'm going to switch this up a little bit here, and I'm going to make it so that we're going to go like this. And okay, this is what we're doing. Nothing big here, but I want to say, you know, every artist was first an amateur. That quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson is so great, because, you know, it's so comforting to know that, you know, if we're looking at Michelangelo, or, you know, who's your favorite artist, Scott Christensen, or, you know, Daniel Keyes, or whoever it is that you're like, oh man, they're so great. Like, look at what they do. Look at all that they've accomplished. You know, Monet. I mean, like, Monet started out not being able to draw stick figures. You know, I mean, he started out as a total beginner. Every artist that we know, that we look up to, started out being young, started out not having that much experience, and just grew. And that's an encouragement to us, because we might be at a place where we're always, it feels like we're always looking up at people, and we only see them in their current state, and we don't realize that it was a journey for them too, and that they didn't just start out like the professional artists that they are, and that they had a lot of bumps along the road. And so if that's kind of something that you feel like every once in a while, like you just wonder, like, is this, you know, am I the only one? No, you're not. Everybody starts out. And we just kind of want to walk through some things with you this morning. And I want to start by showing you some places where you can find some helpful content on our site. Because we're going to give you a snapshot here, but it's not going to be everything. There's going to be more that you might say, I want to like learn more about that. So first place that I would recommend going right off the bat is Acrylic 101. And in Acrylic 101, what you're going to find is a walkthrough of supplies, like all the basic stuff, like what I do today, but in a lot more thorough way. And you're going to get a framework for the painting process. So not only is it just kind of like talking about supplies and that, but it's going to also tell you kind of like, this is how I go about painting. And this is why I go about painting in this order. These are kind of the steps, and this is kind of why. The second thing is Color 101. And I think, in a lot of ways, the name says it all. And part of the reason I laugh about that is that when we were creating Color 101, we got questions. We got over 300 questions in a really short amount of time all about color, because let's be honest, I mean, color can be very confusing. It can be intimidating and stuff like that. So we created that course based off of a lot of those questions. And I just want to say, Jean, glad to have you. Dizzy, Elizabeth, nice to have you. Hannah, I can't see Hans. Anyways, lots of you, glad you're here. And like I said earlier, you might have missed it, but if you have a question, make sure you put it in the chat, because Renee is here with me and we will be able to answer questions. So Color 101, though, it is a really helpful course, and it talks more about some of the details about even just how to read a paint tube. Some helpful things there, like when you're buying paint and what you might want to pay attention to. And then we've got a section of frequently asked question videos that when we were receiving questions, over and over and over again, we'd say, okay, this is a video that we should make, dealing with this, like how to varnish a painting, or should you, like gesso, what's the difference between gesso and modeling paste, or, all these different things. So that's a whole section, and they're all short, and it's just a wide variety of topics. So I want to say, hi from Norway. I just realized Hans said hi from Norway. So we're going to talk a little bit about color right here at the beginning, just because this is a big subject, and there's a couple things that I don't want them to throw you off at all as you jump into these courses. But here's kind of the way that I laid out Color 101, or I should say Acrylic 101, the colors in Acrylic 101. Now, so what you see is I had this box, and I'll show you the box, but you might have already seen it or something, but it's a plastic box, and it has these different compartments, and you can see I put titanium white here. I have neutral gray, Mars black, and then up here, what I tried to do essentially was make this into something kind of like a color wheel. So you can see it goes from yellow, like a lighter yellow over here, to deeper yellow, and then to red. This red leans more towards orange. This red leans more towards violet. This blue leans more towards violet, and this blue leans more towards green. So it kind of, if you think about it, it can kind of create a little bit of a color circle there. And that was a simplified palette, and that's kind of the basic palette. I think if you have these colors, if you have these, you can really create so many colors. But you'll see that I've simplified some things even more than this. But before I simplified, I made it a little bit more complicated, because this was simple for me. What I had used before that, and what I ended up kind of putting into some paint along videos, was I did what I called an extended palette. And you can see that I filled in. This green actually leans more towards blue, and this green is a little bit warmer. I put in orange here. I put in dioxazine violet, and then I put in a couple neutral colors in here. So that filled out that whole box almost. I've got a couple empty spaces here, but pretty much that whole box is full. But what started happening, and the reason that we changed this was not in any we weren't trying to confuse anybody. What I realized was people were confused when I was painting, because I would be dipping into one of these little containers, little compartments, and people couldn't tell where I was dipping. And so they're like, what color? Every video I make, I'd get so many questions. What color were you using? What color were you using? And I just thought there's got to be an easier way. So that's what actually kind of got us into Color 101. And we started I started just reading more about color, like trying to understand more how I could teach it and do a better job of explaining color. And I went back to this simplified palette. Like this is essentially acrylic 101 colors right here. You have phthalo blue, you have ultramarine blue, you have quinacridone red or crimson, and you have cadmium red, you have cadmium yellow deep, and you have cadmium lemon yellow. And like all these, you can see how it mixes, and this is all stuff you'll learn in Color 101 when you go through there. But it was fascinating for me as I was looking, because I just was thinking it's too simplistic to say mixed green, right? Because what green? There's so many different kinds of green in here. And the difference between ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow deep is much different than phthalo blue mixed with cadmium yellow light or lemon. It's totally different. And it's the same thing in these mixes as well. And so we were on that trip, and I ran into, we went to Diana Shine's house, and she actually showed me something. She wasn't intentionally showing me something. I just had never seen it before. And she set up her palette like this, where she wasn't using any box. She wasn't painting out of the box. She just put her cadmium, or like her yellow here, her red here, her blue here, and then she mixed these colors. And I thought, this is brilliant. I love this. And so there will be other places where you see me paint with the paint straight up on my palette. I'm not always dipping into a paint box, although sometimes you'll see me do that. And again, I'm explaining this so that hopefully it won't be too confusing. But generally now, if you see me do something currently, I've really tried to keep this as simple as possible. And I have three main colors. The cadmium yellow. This is cadmium yellow light usually. And this number here is what you will find on the back of the tube. So if that doesn't make sense, make sure you go into Color 101 and I'll explain it a lot more there. But this is quinacridone red, and that's my normal go-to color. And when you go into Acrylic 101, you'll see that it's not the color that I have there. I have cadmium red and I have quinacridone magenta. And so why did I choose quinacridone red as my go-to red is because I've been always trying to find what is the yellow that is the most pure yellow. Like, could it mix a good green and a good orange? And what red can mix a good orange and a good violet? Like, because they usually do really well with one, but they don't do really well with the other. And I found that quinacridone red was the closest that I could get to the color that I wanted in terms of the red, at least that I've found so far. It's my go-to red, and it's kind of in between cadmium red and quinacridone magenta. And then, of course, I have ultramarine blue over here. And so these are just mixed colors. This is the mixed violet. This is mixed orange. Between these, and this is the mixed green. And you can see that, again, we kind of have the color wheel happening here. And what's nice about this, and you'll see Diana explains a lot more about it in Color 101, but it's just a lot easier to keep track of where you mix colors and how you mix them and things like that. And then, of course, I usually use a little bit of Mars Black and titanium white.
Hey, Jed, can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting how when we did Acrylic 101, we had an idea of a good palette of colors to suggest, right, for members.
Yeah.
But I hope that you guys are seeing that it's kind of a process too. Like, I think you kind of need to figure out what works best for you. So definitely when you go into Acrylic 101, we suggest getting those colors. But over time, you might find that you prefer one over the other, or you'll notice when Jed paints on Friday nights, he uses a small box. It only has 7 sections. Have you been using that box, Jed, recently?
Yeah, and I'll show more of that physically here in a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, Jed is always changing what he's doing, and we don't want to make this too complicated, but we just want to say, like, don't get too worried about what colors you have or don't have. I think over time, basically, what we've communicated more than anything is just have a red, a yellow, a blue, and a black and a white. So I think just kind of have that in your head. Don't get worried about having the exact same colors that Jed has all the time. Just yeah,
and
just try
I
to keep
can
it simple in your mind.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep it simple. And I would also say with that is that these colors are colors that I like. And they produce quite a few various, different mixes. So they're not perfect because the ultramarine blue will never create a really great teal color. Like, it won't. That's why I also use phthalo blue. And if you listen to me sometimes, you'll hear me talk about how I like to throw in cadmium orange into this sometimes because it's a brighter orange and can do more. But really, like Renee's saying is, if you don't have every exact color, that's something that you might try. You might say, well, I want to see what quinacridone red, does. And I just want to note that quinacridone red is a tricky color because Liquitex calls a different pigment quinacridone red than what I have there. And that's why these numbers are so important, because the names that manufacturers use can be quite different. So, but the main thing that Renee was saying, and I would emphasize too, is just, you'll learn as you practice. And so don't go out and buy like five tubes of paint that you've never used before. Just get a little bit of paint, get a little bit of the colors that you think you want, and then see how they work. And if you find another color that you think, oh, I wonder what this red does, or I wonder what this blue does, test it. Just get a little bit and test it, and you'll find out that, you'll see what happens. And it'll be fun, I think, for you. Now I'm going to kind of transition to show you some other stuff here. And let's see if I can go like this real quick. Now, I just have to try to make sure that I can. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions here. PY37, which I've noticed. Okay, cadmium yellow medium is closer to Utrecht yellow light. Yeah, so that's the whole thing, is that the manufacturers vary a lot. You might find that cadmium yellow medium in like that's usually more yellow than I want. I tend to now my favorite color for cadmium for yellow is actually this one. It's this is cadmium free yellow light. It's just the actual pigment that the color that comes out. It's my favorite. It's really light, but it's also pretty strong, and I feel like it makes a good mix. And it's a Liquitex color. But if you buy in Utrecht, you want to get cadmium yellow lemon, and that's closer to this than if you bought cadmium yellow light in Utrecht, because it's just the thing with the manufacturers are different, and it's a little bit annoying, but it's, I guess, the way that it is. So Dizzy, Elizabeth, you say I have all the colors. I have colors with golden, basic, and Winsor Newton. Good. M. Graham, Quinn, red. Boy, that is a good question. I don't use it. What I found is that I'm pretty sure in M. Graham, because I have a friend who sent me some, and I'm pretty sure that in that brand, it's quinacridone rose. I think it's called Quin Rose. That is the PV19. That would be the color that I use. How to make cadmium yellow medium to cadmium yellow light? Well, maybe buy some cadmium yellow lemon. I'm just suggesting you might try that. Buy that and mix them together. Sometimes I do that if I have a color that's not exactly perfect. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit here too with let me see. I might need to adjust my camera here so that you can see a little bit more, but basically you can see this is kind of my that original box, and you can see how messy it is. The box that Renee was talking about is this one, which has just 7 compartments in it. And in here, to make it more interesting, you know, like I have this is the cadmium yellow light that I was just talking about that I like. This is cadmium orange. So that's a place where I throw that in there. And then these are the other 2 colors that you saw. And sometimes if I'm doing a demo and I don't want to confuse people and use a different color, I just close that. And then these are the colors that you'll find in Color 101 right there. So
yeah, and that box you can if you're in the US, you can get it at Hobby Lobby for a few dollars.
Yeah,
if you want to use a smaller box.
Or you can ask me and I'll send you one of these old ones that's kind of got dried up paint. What I find is that the compartments on here will tend to dry up a little bit faster than the larger boxes because they have more air gaps around them. And so, but it's a bead box, and you can see this is just called Craftmates Lockables, and it's got a little locking mechanism on it, but it is simply a bead box.
Hey,
so,
Jed, somebody's asking what brand you're using for those colors there.
Well, okay, I'll show you. My favorite paints right now are, I'm grabbing them so I can bring them over. My favorite paints right now are Winsor Newton Professional Grade. There are 2 grades in Winsor Newton. The other kind is not as great. It's Galleria is the name of the other one. That's more of the student grade, and it's fine. But for what I want this for, I use the professional grade, and it's a little bit more expensive, but the nice thing about it and what I like about it is that it has less color shift, meaning when you put it down, it dries closer to the color when it's wet than most of the paints that I've used in the past. And the colors in Winsor Newton, I still prefer this yellow to the Winsor Newton yellow. So I have lots of paint from lots of companies. You know, I mean, I've got tons and tons. I still have tons of Utrecht. I still love Utrecht. I still love lots of the color or lots of the paint companies. I just prefer Winsor Newton because of that color shift thing. Now,
and Jed, we also said if you guys have looked at the supply list, it says on there the student grade paints. We think they're actually okay to use. Jed used those for years and years. But we recommend if you are going to use student grade to buy yellow in higher grade and maybe white. Would you include white in that, Jed? Because there's way better coverage, especially in yellow, we've noticed.
Yeah, well, and I would say something here too about that is that so yesterday I was doing some painting and I had bought this color right here, which is yellow medium azo. I don't know. I just was trying to see what it was like, I guess, at some point, because it looks pretty close to the cadmium-free yellow light. But it's not nearly as opaque. It's very transparent and it doesn't mix very strongly. So even though it's a professional, grade paint, it's still not as good in terms of being covering well as like this cadmium free yellow light or cadmium light would be. So sometimes it's just the actual pigment. But if you have a student grade yellow, it can be very hard and pretty frustrating. I was gonna go grab one to see, because I used to have a bunch of them, but I think we gave them away because they do get frustrating. It's hard to use them. Renee, do you think I should move into brushes, or are there some more questions about color there?
I'm trying to decide if we should answer questions as they come up or if we should save them for the end. Why don't you just keep going, Jed, and I'll write down questions as I see them, okay?
Okay, Renee's going to write them down. So what you will also see is that when we started out, I didn't have a real big preference for brushes. I honestly could care less about like what I used. I had a wide variety of cheap brushes, but more recently I've kind of fallen in love with Princeton. I was at an event, a conference once, and somebody gave me a couple and I used them and I thought, oh wow, these are really cool. And then I got approached by them later to be an ambassador for them, and I thought, well, I would totally be an ambassador for you because I like them already. I'm not going to lie and act like I like a different, brush. But these are the brushes from Michaels. They're called Artist Loft Firenze. They're like the nicer brush. And these were the first brushes that I bought that I paid extra money for. I mean, before that, I honestly was just buying the cheap brushes that were in the 10-pack. You get a 10-pack and it's got like two medium-sized brushes kind of in the middle, and the rest are fairly small, and they usually look something like this. It's like this. I bought so many packs of these, and you can see that I've got tape on here and everything because it's these ends come off so easily. But honestly, I didn't have any issue with these. They were fine. They wore out usually kind of quick, but they were good. So if you don't have professional brushes or what I'm talking about, don't even worry about it. I mean, I had brushes. This is another one that's maybe a little bit nicer, but it's kind of similar to the cheaper ones that I bought in the beginning. Although this one, I don't know where I got this. Maybe it's a little bit nicer. But all that to say that you can find pretty decent brushes, at a lot of different levels. And the main thing is to get something that you feel comfortable with and that you like. And so I like these Princeton Catalyst now. They're great. I almost always use flats. So meaning that's the type of brush that it is. It's got a flat end. It's square kind of tip, and it's usually they're usually not too small. I'm looking for a bigger one. Well, here's a bigger one. This is not the same brand, but this is like my big brush that I use to do wash kind of things. And then when we're talking about canvases, I'll show you my favorite here. This is a Centurion a linen prime panel, and it's my favorite for just everyday kind of painting, because what I like about panels is that they're hard. So if I accidentally kind of, bump into them or something, I'm not that worried about putting a hole in it. And I also like the way that they're kind of thin, and you can put them next to each other, and you can they don't take up that much space compared to a bigger, deeper canvas. And I'll show you a couple other things here that are canvas kind of paintings, or let's see. So here's more of a traditional canvas where you have, I've been working on this. I started this a long time ago. I kind of like this, but haven't done much with it for quite a while. But you can see the back of it. It's a stretch canvas, and it's kind of thick, right? Then you have these kind of boards. This is a board, actually. You can see that it's hard. It's like an MDF panel. And I like these too because they're, I'm not worried about injuring them or hurting them very much. And then of course you have the thinner canvases that are also stretched, but they are, I'm trying to see if I have one nearby. But those are kind of like my favorite options really are the, like I like these hard ones probably more than normal canvases now. Oh, here's a thinner, smaller canvas that I can show you. Just the normal kind here. And all of these are great. It kind of is what you get used to, what you feel like you want to do. The benefits to a harder surface, in my mind, are that, you can use a palette knife or different things, and it's gonna, like you can use a palette knife on here for sure too, but you can be a little bit rougher. You can do a little bit different stuff with a hard surface.
And Jed, can I say something?
Yeah.
I've noticed some of the members recently in the community talking about the acrylic pads. So it's like a pad of paper, but they could be useful, like if you're doing a lot of practice paintings. But then they were saying like the edges curl up. So they were putting gesso on, I think, to make it thicker. I don't know. I think you need to, they get a pad that's thick enough that they don't have to do anything to. I think it was like 400 Strathmore series or something. So anyway, that's another option that could be good if you're painting a lot and you have a lot of practice paintings, and you just don't want to have a bunch of panels laying around. So anyway, I was just reading about that recently.
Well, thank you. That's great.
I just spilled some water.
Renee, if you want to, I think that I'm ready for questions. I see somebody just asked, can you view this again afterwards? Yes, this will totally be available. And we'll put it in, I don't know, Renee will tell me where we're going to put it, but it'll be easy for you to find.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it'll be here. So however you got here, it's just going to be here on YouTube. This is an unlisted thing, so it's just for members. So by all means, like, just click the link to get back here. We'll probably try to put it into the course as well for you, but just in case you want to see it right away, you can come right back here to this link and you'll be able to watch it again.
Yeah, and I see some people commenting about using those acrylic pads. So that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, there was a question, Jed. Tony was asking do you know of a good recipe for burnt sienna or burnt umber?
burnt umber and burnt sienna.
Yeah, like how to
I'm
mix
just
those.
joking. I don't have a recipe. I was just joking, like to just buy it. I have a few colors, so I don't use these very much. But I'm going down this Friday, and I'm going down to do some painting. So I have burnt sienna, and this is raw sienna here, and I don't know if I have a burnt umber, but I thought, I might bring those because for me, when I'm painting outside, time is important. And sometimes it's easier to just have a color that's close to what I want, and then it's less mixing. So I don't really have a recipe for you on that. There are colors that you can get that are like it's its own pigment, right? So this is PR 101. I don't know what that is. It's a red though. I know that pigment, and then R is red. So whatever the 101 is, it's essentially burnt sienna. And so you're not going to get that exact mix, but you can get really close with probably something that's like orange, like red, yellow, black, and then just like trying to tweak things around. And the red that you use will matter. Like cadmium red will do a better job of getting that than quinacridone red. And but it's going to need a little bit of blue in it too, or it's going to need to get shifted towards not so bright and vibrant in chroma. But really, you can do a lot of mixing and discovering if you just put a couple colors out and start playing around with it on your palette.
Hey Jed, I see a couple questions here that I'll ask you, and then I have some questions too. Did you have anything else that you want to talk about? Because I have some other thoughts.
I'm ready for any questions.
What's the best way to store finished paintings?
Well, the best way to store them is to put them in a frame and hang them on a wall. And if you don't want to do that, like I have paintings in a little rack, and so they're not flat. They're kind of like this, and they're just next to each other. And I think what I try to do is I try not to store them flat. I try to store them as much vertically as possible, just because you don't want them to stick together, and you want them to be, you don't want to put them face to face. So you don't want them to stick like that. And the acrylic paint will, if pressed together, if in the right circumstances, it can stick together. You can fix it, but it's better if you just kind of keep the face of the painting away from each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then what's the best canvas to use for a bathroom? So I think they mean if you're going to hang the painting in a bathroom because of humidity. So I just think you probably wouldn't use the paper, any type of paper, probably just something hard, right? And then if you use the wood canvas, do you have to use gesso with it, or can you just use acrylic paint?
Are you saying like if you have a wood panel, do you have to gesso it first?
Yeah, the wood panel or the wood canvas.
Yeah, you should gesso it first because it's going to give it the best ground to paint on. I mean, I believe that even if you didn't do that, your acrylic paint could stick to it and it could stay on there for a very long time. But the gesso is going to give you a very nice, even surface to paint on. It's going to make sure that it's adhered well, and it's just going to be the better option for you.
Yeah. So Marianne asked a question, and it ties into what I was going to ask too. She says, I did the challenge and it was my first time using acrylics. It was hard to move the paint. Do you wet the brush to begin? So I think that whole issue of, well, for one, acrylics drying really fast, like how do you handle that? And I do get a lot of questions about how much water you use, because it doesn't seem like you use a lot of water, but your paint glides really well. So can you talk about those, Jed?
Yeah, so good question. And I was just going to joke around, but then I realized that you don't know me well enough maybe for me to joke around too much. So, because I was going to say that, well, I have a secret special ingredient that I put in my paint that I'll never tell you. No. What it is I don't put too much water in my brush. Sometimes, I mean, early on, you saw me with this very big brush. I will sometimes use some water, maybe some medium like this. Like this is a Liquitex matte medium, and it's pretty good for, you know, mixing in with something. I mean, there's lots of mediums you can use that will thin down your paint and make it a little bit more transparent and go on well. But that's usually what I do when I want more of a wash or a glaze or something like that. When I'm just painting and I'm just dipping into pure paint, I don't mix anything in with it. And what I would say is that if you're used to oils, you can have a small amount of paint. I think I don't use oils very much, and I really never do anymore. But what I've noticed is it feels like you can have maybe a little bit of like turpentine or thinner or something in there, and then like a little bit of paint, and it will go for quite a long time. And it's not quite that way with acrylics. So you need more paint usually than probably what you're thinking. If you really load up your brush, it will do better. And I do sometimes, even though I'm not thinning my paints down, and I don't intentionally put water in my brush, you know, when I'm scooping paint up, I don't intentionally do that, but I do wash my brushes every once in a while. And for instance, like I have this brush right here, it's just sitting there, and it's got quite a bit of water in it. If I went like this, you'd probably see it drip. So now when I go to paint with it, I usually wipe that off. So it's not saturated, but it does have a little bit of water still on it. So, you know, maybe that is something that I don't even think about that might make a difference. But I also know that there are times when I really don't want any water to be on my brush because I want it to be as thick of paint as possible. And so I intentionally will search around for a brush that's totally dry, or I'll take it into my paper towel and I'll make sure that it's dry so that paint can be thick.
But I also think that, don't you think the Masterson palette, the moisture from underneath kind of
yeah. Well, if you're, yes.
helps your paint be moist.
That's a great, it's a great point. And let me grab this here. I'm going to get my palette and I'll turn on this other camera real quick. So you can see here that I've got my Masterson palette, and I just got this new sponge. I just put this new sponge in here, and it's totally saturated. Now, this paint is way too wet. Like the sponge was too wet. I don't like it this way because you can see it's like totally kind of diluted down overnight. I put it on yesterday, and it's diluted down, and like I usually paint with my palette on an angle, and you can see that this is dripped down like the other direction. And so I don't like how wet this is right now, but yes, this, when you have it on here, it generally probably does tend to keep it more moist and usable.
And in acrylic, I don't know if you guys have the Masterson Stay Wet palette, but I've heard a lot of members say it was a total game changer for them when they bought that and started using it. Like it totally changed the way they painted. They loved painting all of a sudden. Like it was amazing. So if you can get it, it would be really awesome. And in Acrylic 101, Jed shows you how to set that up, how to use the palette and how much water to put in and all that stuff. So.
Oh, that's a great, okay, so I see a couple other questions. What is the best way to mail a painting? Renee can answer that.
Yeah, it just depends on if it's framed or not framed. I'll show you something.
And while she's looking.
Oh, I have it.
Oh, you got it.
I have
Okay.
3 of Judd's paintings he did for the challenge that I'm shipping to people who won them. So these are just panels, the canvas panels. So I'm actually just putting them inside these big envelopes. They're a little bit padded, and I'll probably slip a piece of cardboard in there also just to make it a little more sturdy. So I do that a lot. If they're framed, you actually need to have a box, you know, with a lot of protection around the corners and edges. So we have like styrofoam sheets that we wrap it in, and then we have plastic to keep the styrofoam on the painting, and then padding around that. So recently I've just started bringing paintings to UPS because they actually will ship, package them for you really well. It's a lot to have all those supplies at home. So I do that for a long time, but just in the last probably year or two, I just started taking them to UPS, and they've been taking care of that for us. So
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. I do think if you have more money than time, UPS is the best option for sure. Simple.
yeah, it's you definitely pay, but for all the time and the expense of buying the supplies yourself, I recently I felt like it's been worth it for us. So
Yeah. It might depend on where you are, but we found it to be great. Yeah. Okay, I just want to I want to get into some of these questions here. What is the best canvas used for a bathroom? Okay, we just talked about that. I think the wood would be the best one. I didn't say that, but I would do wood. Okay. Oh, and somebody was saying, yes, I think that if you, the brush might make a difference too. Somebody was commenting that if your brush is really floppy, it might be hard to move the paint around. But if you have a thick, like strong enough brush, it should make a difference there too. Is it necessary to, yeah.
Oh, I just want you to know I am keeping track of these questions. I was just waiting until you're done to ask you another one, but go ahead.
Okay. You can ask me then.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'll answer. I saw a question about varnish. Do you need to varnish your painting?
Go for it. Yeah.
Yes, you do need to varnish your paintings. It's not like they will fall apart if you don't, but it's always good to protect them, and that will put a layer on the outside that will keep it from, you know, the actual paint being affected by things like sunlight, people's hands. You know, you can wash it easier if it's varnished. And there's actually the best way to do it, and you can go into the frequently asked question videos and see a little bit more, and even see me do a bit of varnishing. But the best way is to have your painting and then an isolation coat and then varnish. And that's just the kind of like the best approach ever. Do I do it every time? No, I don't.
Yeah, but we use this a lot. Winsor Newton gloss varnish. Yeah, we take the paintings outside because this is pretty toxic, and just lightly spray it a couple times. So anyway, but in the FAQs, there's more information about that too.
Okay, now I saw a question about, somebody said something about, should I use water with my acrylic paints, because I've heard that that's not good. It decreases the binding ability. Yes, you do not want to use, you don't want to thin your paints down with solely water. Like if you're, I mean, having a little water in your brush is fine, totally fine. It's just if the level of water that you're mixing in becomes quite high, then you're kind of decreasing the ability of the on a molecular level of the paint to actually attach to the surface. So the better way is to use medium, some kind of medium, because that will keep the molecules, you know, good and adhering to the surface. So good question there.
Hey Judd, here's one. I find it hard if I don't finish a painting in 1 or 2 days. It just sits there unfinished. How to overcome this and push forward? And this is a really common question. This,
yeah,
you know, motivation,
totally.
right? And I think you did an FAQ video about it, actually, hon.
I did do one on motivation. Yeah.
I think you did.
Um,
Yeah.
and getting stuck, which there's a difference between, in my world, of getting stuck. There's different reasons you get stuck, right? So one, you get stuck and you haven't even started. One, another is that you get stuck like you did, like where you did a painting, but then you set it aside. Maybe you didn't know what to do, so you got stuck not knowing what to do, and you weren't sure if you were finished or not. And then there's like you got stuck. Maybe you painted for a long time, but now you're kind of like at a place where you're burnt out and you just can't get motivated, right? So there's like different kinds of times when you need different motivation. Maybe you might need rest at one point, and maybe you just need to kick yourself in the butt and do it at another point. And maybe you need to like have some direction at another point. Like, I don't know what to do. If you think your painting is done, but you're not 100% sure, it's totally good to set it aside and just maybe not even touch it. You might come back to it 3 months later and realize like you've grown, you've seen more things, and you've had a little space from it, and you can see something really definite that needs to be done. So I wouldn't despair if you have paintings that are not finished, but you might be saying that you get halfway done with a painting, and then you kind of get scared, or something comes and happens. And I don't really know how to give you the best advice, but I did hear this, and it might be helpful. It was in storytelling or writing. It was actually a writer who said this, that they never finished their thought. Like, so if they were writing a book, a story, and they knew what they were doing, and they were coming close to the end of the day, and they had like maybe half of a chapter left in their head, like they knew exactly what they're going to write, they would not finish that half of a chapter. Because what would happen is the next day they would have emptied their brain of all that information, all that good story, and they would come to a blank page, a blank chapter, and they would have to think of it from scratch again. So you might find something like that where you go like, if you know that your time is running short, like you've only got half an hour left of painting, and you know exactly what you're going to do on your painting, but you know that you're not going to be able to finish it, you might say, you know what, I'm just going to stop right now. I know what I'm going to start with tomorrow. I need to put in this part over here. I need to do whatever this is. By keeping that 30-minute chunk that you know what you're going to do for the next day, it might give you that starting point where it's like, okay, I know exactly where I'm going to go. And then it's a lot easier to keep going that second or third day. Best advice that I can give right now.
Okay. Jed, do you, Katie Wolf just asked if that spray varnish runs, and I just, when we spray them,
do it flat, and
and it doesn't run. You just do a light, it's like a light mist. It doesn't run at all. So,
Jed, do like two coats, 2 or 3 coats of a light, and on a very flat, you don't,
There's a lot of good questions. The Masterson Stay Wet palette, there's questions about it getting moldy, and you use hydrogen peroxide, Jed, and sometimes people ask me, go ahead.
Okay, so I have used hydrogen peroxide in the past. I don't use it anymore. Not because I'm against it, but I don't know if it's the best. What I would suggest is cleaning it regularly. Like, that's just the very best, is just say clean it all the time. If you still have an issue, using distilled water will help. And the other thing is, if you don't want to use the sponge, what I started doing, even though I have a sponge in there now, that's the first time I've used a sponge in probably about 4 months. Before that, all the time I was just using paper towels. And so I'm kind of in the mindset that paper towels are easier to deal with. Also, a chamois cloth. I want to get a couple chamois cloths that I could, like when I'm done, take it out, throw it in the washer, and just deal with it that way. I wouldn't really want to do that with one of these sponges. but I think that I would be okay kind of like rinsing it out if it was a chamois cloth, rinsing it out well, and then throwing it in the wash and just washing it and having a couple of them that I rotate.
Yeah, cool. Somebody asked about blending. Jed, do you blend very much, and how do you blend?
There's a whole bunch of, that's a big topic. I'll go real briefly. You can blend in acrylics with dry brushing. If you want to learn more about that, Angela Bandurka did a workshop with us in the spring and summer, and she talked quite extensively about dry brushing. And you can learn a lot.
Can you tell them where that is then?
By going back into your paint along videos. There's all the old live videos there in your membership in the library. And then the other way, I mean, you have to work fast if you're going to do wet, but you can put on more paint. You can use a palette knife to apply a thicker layer, and then that will stay wet longer. You can also, what I do a lot is smudging. So a lot of smudged edges with a finger or a thumb or something like that. And then finally, you can have a spray bottle like this. I've used this a number of times, and it's really awesome sometimes to keep your painting horizontal, mist it a little bit, and see what you can do. The other thing that I've used, let me see if I can find it, but I should do a video with this. I think I might have actually, I might have done something like this, but you can put down something like a medium first before you start painting into it. I have a slow drying medium that I've sometimes on a smaller painting, like a 12 by 16, I'll cover the whole canvas and then I'll paint into it. And it does start getting tacky and a little bit sticky after a while, but for the beginning parts, for an extended time of probably like 20 minutes, you've got a pretty good chance to blend and do a lot of interesting stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Jed, could you, I think we should wrap this up in a couple minutes so we can keep it to an hour. But could you just talk about preparing your canvas? Like if people have those normal canvas panels like this, can they use paint? Do they need gesso?
Oh yeah, totally. Okay, perfect. So I'll go like this, and so if you have a canvas like this and you want to, paint on it, or if you even had a board, and I guess I could grab one of these. So this is like another kind of board, I mean, it's more like a mounted board, but if you wanted to paint on here, what would you do? Or same thing on here. Now this is a normal Blick canvas panel. You don't need to do anything to this. This is already triple primed with gesso, so you can paint directly on top of that. But if you want to tone it, you can just put any toning color on there. You can get fluid acrylics like this, which are great because they're thin. You can also get something like this, which is black gesso. I like to use this on, like if I'm painting on a black surface, I often will use that gesso. If it's something like this, which doesn't have anything on it at all, you might want to get yourself a can of gesso like this. This is a big, like 1 gallon container of Utrecht gesso. Now this is kind of the thickest gesso that I know of. And when you put it on, what I do is I put it on with a, like this is, you probably can't see, but it's got a little tiny bit of texture on it. And it's because I have a little roller. Now this one is dried up on me because I haven't used it in a while, but I've got this little roller, and when I'm going around and doing, I just have a bunch that I do at the same time, and it will prepare, 10 or 12 canvases at one time, and it'll give it a 2 or 3 coats on there. It'll give it a really nice surface. And then if you want to take a little bit of sandpaper, you can grab some sandpaper afterwards and kind of go over it, make it as smooth or as, bumpy as you want it to be. But that's what I do to prepare a bare wood board.
Yeah. But when people tone a canvas, they can just use paint, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just use paint. You don't need to use gesso or anything like that. If you're going on here and you just are starting, you just say, I want to paint it red or orange or tone it neutral color, anything like that. Just normal paint is perfect for that.
Yeah. Jed, do you want to answer one more question before we go? Do you see any?
Yeah, you guys, and I want to say too, if you had a question that got missed, pretty much every time we do a live event, you can ask a question. So on Friday at the end, I'm gonna introduce the theme. I'm gonna do a 30-minute demo, and then at the end I'm gonna have a short Q&A time. We're wanting to keep these so that they're as close to an hour as possible, so that we value your time, and we want you to get the most, just bang for your buck with it. But we always wanted to include an opportunity that you can ask questions. The other thing is, as you saw even earlier today, if you ask a question here, you often get comments and replies from members who've been around, if they've been around for a while. So please go into the community with any question that you have too. And sometimes you'll get answers in there so fast from people who know. And we're amazed at our members. I mean, and you guys are going to be right in there too, helping other people with the knowledge that you have. So anyways, and then the other thing is, lastly, just like make sure you also check the FAQ videos, because we did spend a fair amount of time and effort like making videos that we knew people had lots of questions about, and they're there for you. So, go in there and you'll get a more detailed response.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if was there one more question that I can answer? One more?
I think there's several more, but why don't we wrap up?
Okay.
And
well, guys, it's probably time for us to be done then. But thank you so much for being here. Renee, do you have any last words?
No, but my only last word is just paint. Like, don't be discouraged if you do a painting and it doesn't turn out, because you'll probably do 10 and you might only like one of the 10. So just as a beginner, just paint. Like just put in the mileage with your brushes. And Jed, you have a good story about that with Robert Genn, don't you?
Yeah, so Robert Genn was one of my first instructors, and he had gone to art school, and he got out, and he didn't want to do anything else. He knew he wanted to be an artist, and he just painted. He just like locked himself in his room, and he had an apartment, and he locked himself in his apartment. And he painted for 6 months. He ate rice and beans and everything like that, and he painted like hundreds of paintings. And at the very end, he laid them all out on this big floor, I guess, somewhere, and like maybe his apartment. He laid them all out so he could see them all, and then he just like picked out the 10, because he had probably a couple hundred, and he picked out 10 that he thought were decent, right? And then he threw away the rest. He actually threw away all the rest. But he took those 10 and he took them to a gallery, and he was too afraid to actually approach them. So he just like left them in the back with a note or something. And anyways, they called him back, and it was the start of a journey for him. So his advice to every artist that came to workshop that said, oh, I want to be an artist, he would say, go paint 100 paintings. And when you're done, come back and talk to me. Because what Renee said is totally true. It just takes time to develop and to gain the traction, and to like even sometimes to know the questions that you really really want to know. But
Yeah.
you're doing awesome. We're so thankful for you, and we love you. We're proud of you. So,
Yeah.
Renee,
Thanks
is
for
that
being
good?
here, guys. We'll be back on Friday.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you Friday. Thank you for being here. Have an awesome rest of the day, and God bless.
Okay, take care.